Welcome, listeners, to www.ironradio.org, the website and podcast for all things strength sports and sports nutrition. Thanks for listening.
Good morning, everybody. You are on another episode of Iron Radio. We're going to make sure it records today so you don't miss out on all our amazingness. This is Phil Stevens. I am a strength coach, powerlifter, Highland Games athlete, and high school football coach.
Nice. This is Dr. Mike T. Nelson, creator of the Flex Diet Cert, which opens again June 17th. Associate professor at the Kerrigan Institute, and I will be in Amsterdam doing a talk with my good buddy Luke Lehman from Muscle Nerds. It'll be this coming weekend when people hear this recording. So it'll be 30 minutes south of there. Come on out.
Nice. All right. And this is Lonnie Lowry, former competitive bodybuilder, professor of a long time. These first two pieces I want to share are from Savannah Logan at Lab Roots.
Strength and muscle sport news.
This first one will do. Physical activity may reduce chronic pain. It says a new study published in the journal Pain, go figure, has shown that participating in regular physical activity may protect people from experiencing chronic pain. The study included almost 7,000 participants in Norway. They were surveyed about their exercise habits, and then their tolerance to cold pain was measured in the lab. And this makes me think about you, Mike, a little bit. Like, you're no stranger to cold water immersion and some of this stuff. 7 to 8 years later, the participants were reevaluated, again, for the presence of various types of chronic pain. Results showed that participants who were more physically active had a higher pain tolerance than those who were sedentary. And again, I know Phil's like, no shit. But it says with higher physical activity, that corresponded to even greater pain tolerance. Well, again, yeah. I mean, if you can tolerate heavy weight on your back in the squat, that's going to be a far cry from a leisurely stroll, I would think, But let's see here. It says higher physical activity corresponded with greater pain tolerance. Being more active, such as participating in moderate physical activity rather than in light, was associated with a 5% lower risk of experiencing chronic pain. For experiencing severe chronic pain in multiple locations, participating in higher levels of physical activity was associated with a 16% lower risk. So if you got it worse, some moderately intense stuff, even better. I'm kind of blown away as I look at these articles. They're really not demanding 1 RM in the squat. They're just saying mild to moderate exercise. Mm-hmm. It really emphasizes to me that because of my nutrition background, I tend to look at things like deficiency diseases. You don't get enough vitamin C, you get scurvy. Well, if you don't at least move around moderately, bad things are going to happen. And in this case, if people struggle with chronic pain, that's one of my wife's specialties, by the way, in counseling. They work on acceptance, and it's not the same thing as defeatism, of course. It's just accepting, yes, this is something that won't necessarily go away. It's chronic pain. Mm-hmm. But, Mike, have you ever looked at anything with cold water as far as, like, how much they tolerate it? Do you measure it? Like, I know that you don't try to induce pain with it, but any thoughts you have on this?
I think they kind of generally use it as one of the stimulus, like a cold pressor test to determine pain. They have other things where they have little sharp mechanical objects that can poke you. And obviously you're listing different types of pain sensors within the body, which gets interpreted differently by the brain. I think something a good buddy of mine, Adam Flotzig, said, and there's a great course from the Kerrigan Institute called Pain Reset, if people are interested. I'm biased. I'm a associate professor there, but it's actually a really good course of the more up-to-date of the neurobiomechanical model. So everyone wants to argue it's only biomechanics, and then all the neuro people, not all of them, but a lot of them are like, oh, it's just your neurology. And it's both. Like, if you break some stuff, like, you're going to have pain, but there's lots of cases where MRIs, everything looked perfect, and the people have debilitating pain. Mm-hmm. And one thing he said that really struck with me is that in general, like, human movement should be incredibly painful. Like, if you look at what's going on and things are moving and sliding and all this stuff, but most of the time it's not, because the brain kind of knows what's going on, and there's an inhibition of those nociception, those kind of tracks coming back to the brain. So my guess would be that exercise is also helping maybe increase some of that inhibition, right? It's your baseline is a little bit better, and that would probably transfer to kind of your day-to-day would be my guess on that.
And I've also seen like training raise your so-called pain threshold over time, because like early on people register hard as pain, if that makes sense. You know, I mean,
Right, yeah.
And then over time it's like that threshold goes up and you learn to enjoy it. I don't know. It just doesn't register as pain anymore.
It's true.
So like that's the biggest thing. Like the biggest thing in training new people for a strength sport is not strength. It's the mental side and just registering like this is fucking normal.
Mm-hmm.
700 pounds is not supposed to feel good. And so, yeah.
It's amazing to me that years later, they're still, well, it's not like they exercise once and years later they're immune to pain. It's just those who regularly exercise, and the more you do it, the better it works.
Yeah, and then just life experience too. I mean, your pain tolerance definitely changes. I mean, it's just like I talk about with, like when we had Odin, like you get that baby shot. And people are like, God, he's crying so much. Like, literally, to that point in his life, that's the worst fucking thing that's ever happened to him. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, he's working off his lifetime scale, and there's been no pain. So a pinprick is like, oh my God! And then through life, like, I've been ran over, I've been landed on by shit. I've been, like, my pain tolerance is way different.
Yeah.
Same as what Phil's saying is just the breadth of experience with the human body. Like, you expand that a little bit, and then the volume on everything else kind of comes down. And I noticed that the clearest with kids, kind of like Phil's saying with Odin, is just so when they first start. Like I had a kid just start this week, and he's like, "All right, I'm gonna go play. I want to play football." Blah blah blah. And first workout, I mean, we did some squats or whatever, and he's super sore, and so he's like, "Oh, I can't come." He didn't say this to me, but. So I was like, oh, he's so sore, he can't come in, but then, he comes in and works out. But like, so 3 weeks in, it's like that is now a normal. Like, okay, I'm sore, but like, oh, okay, now I can move through it and do stuff. And I mean, for him in this particular case is like, if you don't get past that pain threshold anyway, people hitting you feels worse than like working out. Like, so, and it's the same with like conditioning. I see a lot too is like the high intensity, like sled stuff that we'll do sometimes. Usually I do that just to get the kids to like shut up or something, but it's like the first few times they experience it or anyone experiences it, it's like, holy shit, dude, this is like the worst thing I've ever felt. And then if you do it for a while, it's like, oh, I kind of can live here a little bit. You can kind of game it and like you kind of figure out like the range. Pain threshold range, like you figure out what you can tolerate, and it just goes up over time.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The one thing I would add too is that even when you have, at least in my case, when you have experience doing the things, I still think there is an acute adaptation to it. Like I've been in places where my aerobic capacity to do like a hard 2K on the rower was pretty good, but I hadn't done a lot of really hard stuff on the rower. So mentally, I just wasn't prepared to take that much pain. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where even I've noticed traveling and coming back, like during obviously South Padres, we were gone for 6 weeks. I still trained down there. I even brought like the 100-pound inch replica with to do some basic stuff, but I don't do a lot of axial loading things just because I'm normally pretty beat up from kiteboarding. So even coming back, I mean, having trained, but not done a lot of axial loading stuff, like trap bar deadlift with like 275 or 315. Like the first day is like, whoa, what the hell happened? And I still have the skill, maybe or maybe not. The soft tissue integrity is there, but within 1 to 2 weeks, everything's kind of back to normal. You're like, oh, okay, I have everything that feels better at a heavier weight. There's just some of that, I think, acute adaptation too. Also,
Yeah.
Do you guys know any like people in your life that are just kind of like accident prone? Like,
oh yeah,
and you know what I mean? Like they just always have like some crazy injury and surgery. And then, if you witness one later down the line and it's like you're like, oh my God, what is that? Like, your elbow is backwards. What is going on? And they're kind of like, oh yeah, whatever. Or people who dislocate their shoulder often and who they can just kind of pop it back in kind of thing. I mean, it's always seen as like a sign of toughness, but some of that is just like that level of pain just goes down. Like, I don't know if it goes down. You just experience it way different later on.
I've separated my left shoulder and completely ripped out my right shoulder. And when I ripped out my right shoulder playing broom ball, oddly enough, I knew what I did. And so I told the guy, I'm like, yeah, I anteriorly dislocated my shoulder. It's like, what? Like, yeah, you got to go play for me. It's like, oh, okay. And it's like hanging in front of me. And I could still move my hand, but I couldn't do anything else. And luckily, like 6 minutes later, it kind of went back in on its own. Didn't catch a nerve or anything like that. But like the pain difference when it's out to compared to when it's in. Oh, and then when it's in, you're like, oh, this feels great. Until you wake up the next morning, you're like, uh-oh, yeah, I really did something bad.
Damage.
Yep.
Yeah. Now, to be fair, two things. One, this is chronic pain, right? So it's not quite like everything we're just extrapolating, right? We're just discussing. But chronic pain is stuff like, neuropathic pain, the kind of thing that my wife, deals with. Yeah, it's not going away. And this is, and this is just observational. So, it's survey, it's not cause and effect, although I really think this is this points to causality, right? Like when you exercise to the point that you tolerate the pain during, it's the injury, it's the impact, it's even the DOMS, the next day. Like I used to roll my eyes. There was an ibuprofen commercial, I think it was Advil, and this guy changes a light bulb. And the next day he's holding his shoulder. He's like, oh, I need Advil. And I'm like, yeah. Oh my God, is that where we are? Like, because that's the opposite of harder to kill, right? That's easy to kill. If all Americans are like that, then we are very easy to kill. Yeah. And I don't want to believe that. But
it's most overhead work in a month.
I know, right? He's got to take ibuprofen because his little deltoid is sore. Oh my God.
We might be a little bit biased on this, but would you guys think that this points to a like strength or even like aerobic type training that benefits this, conundrum more than, one or the other, like training for strength with the pain tolerance or training for like marathoners versus, powerlifter, right?
You're right, because that's different. Like one's long-term abuse and beating yourself down, and the other is, oh my God, I have 500 pounds on my back. So it's kind of different.
Yeah, I mean, from somebody who's done some of it, like long-term endurance work becomes 100% mental, whereas heavy lifting doesn't. Like, there's a point where you just add weight and I can't fucking do it. Like, and there's a point in, like, okay, I'm going to go run for an hour. 20 minutes in, you just got to fucking keep going. It's not you can't do it. It's just being mentally strong enough to keep putting another foot in front of each other. Mm-hmm. So, and they're both levels of strength, but one is like purely mental. It's just like, hey, stupid, don't stop.
Right. Yeah, anybody can take another step.
Yes. Yeah. And not everybody can take another pound. And that's one thing I thought about a lot with like, high level endurance athletes versus like high level strength athletes. It's like, I can compete, like I could do an ultra marathon. It'll take me 4 days, but I'll fucking finish. You're not squatting 780 pounds. I don't care how long we give you. So like I can finish it. I'll make it 100 miles. See you in a week. But, like I can do what you're doing. It's just going to take me a long time. You can't do what I'm doing.
Right. There's no workaround.
There's no making it, So, it's a different pain thing, but I mean, a lot of it's the same because hell, we talked about it a long time. Like even on the lifting side, a big portion of it is mental. It's just believing you can do it. If you're stepping under a bar and you don't believe you can do it, you're probably not going to do it. But there is still a strength aspect. Like I can't take somebody from 135 and like throw 700 on and be like, just believe. Yeah.
Right.
I had a phrase I stole from someone that belief is super powerful, but it's also limited.
Yeah.
No matter how much I think I can fly, I'm not going to test it by
Yes.
jumping out the second floor window.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But
Okay. I got one more, and then I know Phil's got some reports of some of these records that women are breaking. This one is about mental health. Low intensity exercise may improve mental health. Again, this is Savannah Logan through LabRoots, which I get when I say stuff comes across my desk, this is one way it happens. It says a new umbrella review published in Neuroscience and Behavioral Reviews suggests that regularly participating in exercise, especially here they're talking about low to moderate intensity exercise specifically, may reduce rates of depression. And again, it's almost like that deficiency model. You got to apply, it's not vitamin C for the scurvy. You're applying a little bit of even mild to moderate activity, and you're preventing, I think a lot of the chronic diseases in the Western world are deficiency diseases, right? We're deficient in exercise the same way we could be deficient in vitamin C. So 7 meta-analyses were included in this big umbrella review. So that's the point we've talked about a little bit before. Research, and it's different from 20 years ago. When Mike and I would surf PubMed, we were looking at individual studies, the effect of X on Y. And then we started seeing collections like reviews and meta-analysis. Now we're getting umbrella reviews of meta-analyses. So these are really pointing, when you see something statistically happening, yeah, it's pretty suggestive. This is something you can include in your practice, in some way. Anyway, 7 of these meta-analyses included. Reviews showed that participating in higher levels of physical activity reduced the risk of depression by 23%, reduced the risk of anxiety by 26%. It says physical activity also reduced the risk of psychosis and schizophrenia by 27%.
Wow.
So painting with a broad brush, about a quarter reduction in all these different things. It really suggests there's some central mechanism that's probably benefiting, but and to your wow, Mike, like schizophrenia, I think about that too. Like that seems like a more severe. I'm not saying depression can't be absolutely brutal and anxiety as well, but physical activity hugely beneficial to the emotional side as well. And again, I don't know what you guys think about, your experience with this. I know when I was working, especially on site in the cubicle in the corporate world, a lot of people they'd go to like Orange Theory or some of these places where they've got some coach trying to push them. They really had to engage in as intense exercise as they could just for the stress reduction. Like the anxiety was so bad. They weren't there to try to look better or improve. They were desperate to relieve the stress and the anxiety of, that kind of corporate world and all of its politics and demands. So, it seems kind of obvious. I've been hearing about exercise and mental health. In fact, Tommy Boone was a big proponent of that. 20 years ago, he was talking about that. And there was big government databases about how exercise, it's not just, biceps, of course, it's your brain. It impacts your everything. And Mike, I know you do a lot of the neural stuff. I mean, you're a freaking prof in this. What do you think about this?
Yeah, it's one of those things, like you said, like if you look at the research, it's been around for a while. Like there's an old book by John Radley called Spark that talks about the connection between just movement. Most of the studies then were done in aerobic training, mental health, depression, cognitive function. And one of the other things I was reminded about too is that you're basically the sole output of your brain is movement based. It's directing movement of some kind. So it's not really that surprising that, hey, you do better movement, like everything else is going to function better too. Because I know you've been around Lonnie long enough where you've had the models taught of this is just the central system and this is the nervous system, this is the brain, and they're all still very taught siloed, which I agree it's a good place to start, but it seems like we miss the integration portion of it, which we're getting better at now.
Yeah, I remember, ages ago, Fortress and I talked about the afferent thing. Like, you think like, you're making a motor response by scowling. And then people just don't recognize it. That's also feeding back, and you're telling your brain, it's time to get intense. You're intense, bro. It's like outbound and inbound stuff. But
yeah, the best example of that was these two researchers who were creating all these different facial expressions for some MRI studies. And they even went so far as to have electrodes stuck in their face so they could do the different expressions. And they had like 2 days of doing all the kind of mad and angry expressions so they could get a picture of it, to show people in this fMRI study. At the end of the second day, they both looked at each other and they're like, "You just feel kind of mad and just kind of angry and pissed off?" They're like, "Yeah." And they realized, like, because they're making those faces all the time, they have that feedback. Right?
yeah,
That's one of the ways how we show empathy and everything else. They're like, "Oh."
right. Yeah. Well, let me ask Jarrell and Phil, like from a coaching setting, I know you guys work with groups often. Do you see improvements in people's anxiety or their depressive states or anything like that when they work with you for a while?
Yeah, I'd say we do. I mean, it definitely bleeds into the rest of life. You see people that deal with extensive weight training and the stressors of that. It teaches you better how to deal with stressors and other stressors in life. And people talk about this all the time, how the weight room can bleed into, it teaches you life lessons. Like when shit gets hard, just keep going, And I definitely see that. It comes across. So,
it's a lot of metaphor.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that. It's hard to pinpoint exactly where that line is, though, with a lot of the clients that I have. And I will say this, the one thing I do notice is like kind of a glaring with people who deal with really any conditions like that is almost like a spiral. And that like training, especially here, because you have not only, the training itself, but then community and these other things like when they take this one thing out, this 1 hour a day or whatever out, it's like everything gets worse. And you see that kind of with their stuff. They kind of spiral down, but it's really hard to get people to put this first in these kind of situations. But that's definitely something I've seen to a degree. It's be hard for me to say exactly where that starts and ends, though. I will say like there's kind of things that stand out to me, but it's hard without, I don't know, this is something I always kind of considered. You'd almost want to be connected with, because I don't want to be a psychologist. I don't want to listen to all that, but like you want to be connected with, the psychologist or psychology aspect. So like almost as a part of their treatment to a degree, you know what I mean?
Totally. Yeah. My wife and I, we always talk about like every problem is biopsychosocial, right? And so it's hard, like she and I will talk about like your talk therapy. If someone's brain, if their biochemistry is way off, and I think that's why a lot of the, psychiatrists, they're pill for the ill. Let's just work on the biochemical part of it. We'll make you artificially happy or whatever. But it really feels like talk therapy alone is trying to plant flowers in poor soil, right? And exercise improves the quality of the soil. According to this report, even mild exercise to the tune of about 25%. I mean, you guys know what kind of a jump that is. In sports, at almost any level, a 25% jump is
massive.
Nothing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's hugely powerful. In fact, that Mike, you're mentioning books. Andrew Weil, he did the book Spontaneous Happiness. Oh, God, over a
Great
decade
book.
ago. Yeah, high-dose fish oils and exercise more effective than a lot of antidepressant meds. And Big Pharma doesn't like that, right? Doesn't like to talk about fish oils and this kind of stuff. But to me, yeah, if everything's biopsychosocial, you got to work on the biological part. And to Jarrell's point, it's really got to be part of their whole practice. It doesn't have to be, heavy deadlifts. It can be go for a walk. It really needs to be part of it so you can use talk therapy and plant the flowers in soil that's not spoiled.
That's why some of the trials with like psilocybin, even just doing 2 CBT sessions with psilocybin compared to a standard, I think it was an SSRI, was way more effective, right? Because the theory is the psychedelics are changing that soil, possibly increasing your brain's ability to make changes, neuroplastic states, and everything else. But exercise has a similar effect long term, increasing BDNF, allowing your brain to rewire. So the mechanisms, not to the same magnitude, but they are, I would argue, a little bit similar too.
Dr. Mike saying that actually reminded me of something so it's a motor learning kind of thing going down, but in this motor learning pattern, we always think of the brain as like the kind of governor that has the recipes and gives the orders to the rest of the body. But and this is not a new theory, this is like relatively old. Whereas you treat the brain as just a part of the nervous system. You have a loop, essentially like a information loop with your central nervous system, and your brain is just kind of a part of it. And like there's more of a flowing system in terms of how we learn. And it just like this makes me like the part of this that makes it stand out is like the body is one piece, and like not treating the brain as something this whole different thing. It's like we're doing brain stuff now, and then we're doing body stuff now, like versus like no, it's all like one piece, and like figuring out that rhythm is like almost the central component.
Yeah. One of the phrases I got from Doug Heel that I liked is the brain is in the body and the body is in the brain. Like they're both so, intricated into each other that it's hard to separate them.
Yeah. Okay, I'll tell you, we're at halfway, Mark, so let's go to break. When we come back, I know Phil has 2 bits of news, and that's going to feed right into the topic of the day on women in strength sports.
Hey everybody, Iron Radio is back, and in an expanded way. What can you expect? Well, first, you can get it simulcast every week on the nutritionradio.org network, as well as on the original podcast. It'll appear regularly on iTunes, Spotify, and all your favorite podcasting sites. We have a new Iron Radio / Nutrition Radio Facebook page as well. Please check us out. We're even backed up on YouTube. We hope that an expanded presence will get you the news, education, banter, and guests that's made Iron Radio's community so loyal from the start. You are appreciated.
All right, everybody, we're back. We're going to hit you again with just women in strength sports and the rise that's going on. And I've got several examples here. The first one I'm going to get at, because this is what turned us on to it, is like women in powerlifting and the huge rises we're seeing today. And like we talked about in the show that's missing, it's a big part of it. It's like it's the most exciting thing right now to me is women in strength sports, be it powerlifting, Highland Games, frickin' any power-based sports, Olympic weightlifting. Like it is the most exciting now because records are being crushed. They're reaching that point where men were decades ago, where something is now possible and then somebody else crushes it. So like we're seeing the IPF European World Champions just happened, and I don't think there were any men world records broken, which is very usual. Like you'll see 1 or 2 a year now in men's sports, but it's like every competition you have like a handful of women crushing world records. Like one of them was Betty Adora. She deadlifted 228 kilos at 14 years old.
14?
She's 14 and she weighs 63 kilos. So was that 130 some pounds?
Yeah.
And deadlifted 500 and some. Another girl who just made it into the open category squatted 641 as an 18-year-old. And then the last one was a deadlift where she deadlifted 645 pounds at 183, so more than 3 times body weight. It's just it's amazing where they're at comparatively, but you see the entry of it. Like it's only in the last decade or so that it has become more acceptable and popular with women. And another good one for that is like my daughter is a wrestler, and everybody talks about the rise in girls wrestling. And so I went and crunched numbers, and the good thing about wrestling is it's all tracked, whereas powerlifting, there's 100 federations, so it's a little hard to get a grasp on who's competing where. When you get into high school wrestling, everybody has to sign up. You have one organization. And so they do a good job tracking this. In 1990, there were 112 girls who participated in high school wrestling. And at that time, you basically had to wrestle boys because there were 112 girls in the country. This year, there were 49,000. So, I mean, I don't know the percentage of that rise, but it's hundreds of percents in a few decades. Whereas the boys, of course, has gone up a little bit, but nowhere near. I mean, the boys at this point stay pretty constant because, like, my dad wrestled, so I'm going to wrestle. It kind of goes that you see families of wrestlers, and so it goes on downhill and it stays roughly the same. Like, okay, one person has 3 kids, so okay, instead of 1, there's 3 competing now. But some people have no kids, so. But yeah, it's just a rise in women and strength sports, and just it's become okay, you know, and we're seeing this, and like we talked about before, it's. You see great things happen when other people tell you it's possible. It was the same thing with the 1,000-pound deadlift. Like, for a long time there, I remember, this was way back in our T-Nation days when we were all working with them. Like, it hadn't happened, and everybody didn't think it would ever happen. And then Andy Bolton did it, you know. And then since he's done it, of course, it's come down the pipeline. It's like, oh, okay, well, maybe it is. And then the 1,100 barrier got crossed and things like that. A lot of it is it's just somebody else has to do it to make others believe it can. Like when Usain Bolt broke the world record in the 100 meters, like, oh, okay, that is possible. And it gives everybody else the okay to do it. It enters what we talked about before, belief. You know, for a long time there, people just didn't believe it was possible to pick up 1,000 pounds and things like that. And you're seeing that in, like, other girls see this as like, oh, I can do that. And, you know, the 500-pound squat barrier got crossed. The 550 got crossed. The 600 now got crossed. And they're on this just exponential rise of what they're able to do. And as a father of a daughter, it's just amazing to see. You know, it's amazing to see these women coming up. And you hear stories back in the day of like of course, we just went through that age of, like, women belong in the house and blah, blah, blah. And, like, it's changed. And now it's like, it's okay to do this. But you look back across history and it's like the Vikings and stuff, the women were right there. Like they dug up sites where they were right there with them fighting, you know, and it's just a change that's taken place. And for me, it's like, yeah, right now I train primarily boys in my high school football sports, but I also train a lot of, like, softball girls and things like that. And seeing them come up and learn that it's okay, it's an empowering thing.
It's even more than okay when, I know you said this, Phil, and I think you said this last time we recorded this topic, but was if you're built for it, why does a young lady come to you and be like, I'm here to run a 10K, and you're like, honey, look at your limb length, you're a mesomorph. We'll do the 10K. How do you do that? Like, we'll do that. But then you try to sell them on what they're going to be doing.
And that's definitely one thing I've talked about. Yeah, you get people coming in, it's women and men, but definitely for a long time there, of course, it was women were pushed towards endurance sports. That was more okay, like women marathon runners and things like that. And yeah, I've had numerous ladies come in that have been like, okay, I want to do this. And it's like, yeah, honey, but your legs are, you got 8-inch femurs and they're 12 inches around. You know? So your stride length is not long, so you're fighting yourself, and that's one thing as a coach. It's just we've talked about this away from women. People generally gravitate towards what they're good at, and you can a lot of times as a coach ID, like, man, you're going to be bad at that naturally by how you're built, but you're going to be good at this. And I kind of trick them by, okay, yeah, we'll train for that, and then. You know what's going to help your marathon runs? If we do some cleans, you know, and and they find out they're naturally good at that. And the good thing is the human organism, like, we gravitate towards things we're naturally good at. Like, nobody wants to suck, so if you can point them towards those things, and then, oh, maybe I will try this, even though it wasn't okay, you know, and now it's getting more okay, but Yeah, it's just pointing people where they're naturally good. And I've had the opposite. People that want to be the next strongest man and they're 5'2" and 100 pounds. It's like, yeah, maybe not. You know?
But I mean, honestly, Phil, that's why I always liked bodybuilding. Bodybuilding was a good small man's sport, if you will, because you can become enormously strong and powerful, which is very unusual for somebody who is 5'2" and 100 pounds.
Yeah,
and yeah, they're not going to be competing with Brian Shaw anytime soon. Where I'm blown away by some of that stuff. Like 400 is the new 300 for body weight, and so small guys are out. But strength sports, there's bodybuilding and there's other things for them too.
Yeah, and that's I'd say bodybuilding is predominantly shorter people. It's the top level guys aren't huge. They appear huge because when you're 5'6", 280 and ripped, you're fucking giants. But I deal with the same thing, and it's sad to me a little bit. Like, I'm dealing with a high school team right now. And, of course, every boy on that team wants to think he can go to the NFL. But, like, I look at some of my linemen that are 5'11", 210, and I can't tell them. Like, I want them to play well and keep their heart into it. Like, I can't tell them, dude, you're not making it in college. You weren't born by the right parents. I could just crush them and say, you might as well quit because you're done after high school. But I can't do that. And it's just a fact of it. Like, how many people make it to the NBA when they're under 6'3"? Not a lot, But it doesn't mean you can't play at a fairly high level. I mean, you're just not going to make it there because. And
it's also true. To the topic with women is that, like, when you mentioned Vikings, I was watching that History Channel Vikings show. I watched like all of it. And they were brought up, early on. Like, they were expected to be rough equals. Yes. And if you think, now I'm not saying that women are anytime soon going to be pulling 1,100 pounds in the deadlift. I'm not saying that, but because it's okay. Yeah, you start to dip into the recruiting pool becomes bigger, and you do kind of, get these girls that are freaky good, and the environment is such. It's both nature and nurture, and the environment is good. Like, yes, congratulations, you are awesome. Let's celebrate her,
Yeah, and we're seeing the rise in that in all aspects of it, in Olympic weightlifting and everything else. I mean, Olympic weightlifting, women is relatively new compared to men's. Like, it wasn't a sport that long ago, and it's changed.
That was the first Olympics.
Exactly. So 24 years. That's a drop in the bucket compared to dudes. And now you're getting colleges in wrestling that have organized programs. I think it was Iowa was the one that created the first, and then the NCAA decided, I think it's next year, is going to be the first, like, women's world championship or whatever the NCAA calls it. It wouldn't be world, but unless you're like me and just America is the center of the world. So, but
Phil, I don't know if you've experienced this or not, but something I kind of experienced when training women versus, like, I should say younger women versus young boys is, like, they come into strength with a more, like, because they have no real, like, background understanding, there's no real social expectation.
Oh, yeah.
They come into it with a much better, like, approach. They have a much more just kind of, I don't want to say honest approach to it, but, like, there's no pressure. Like, it's almost all upside once women start training. Whereas boys always, and I mean, I don't know if it's like the ego thing necessarily. Well, I guess it would be, but I just had a kid call me last week and was like, I'm 14 years old. He's like, I want to squat 600 pounds by the time I get to my senior year. And, so I think I should start training or whatever. I said, okay, what's your squat right now? And he's like, I do about 315 for 10. I was like, fuck you. Like, that's such bullshit. Like,
yeah.
And he's only doing that because, and like other kids have this too, where it's like the other boys, where it's like they have this, pressure put on them to, like, be the strongest and all this, where women don't really have, like, in fact, like, in our area here, it's still, I mean, we just had, pretty popular chief go on stage and ramble off about women in the kitchen kind of.
Mm-hmm.
So it's still just like everything is upside. Then they start to see stuff. They kind of feel that empowerment bit, like from a more honest perspective. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so that my experience working with women, especially young women, is almost easier because they approach it with this kind of novelty, curiosity aspect better than most boys do.
Well, I think that's why we're seeing an astronomical rise in it. They're very coachable in those sports because they were born without a penis. And now, like, boys have been told from an early age, like, oh, you got to be a big, strong man and blah, blah, blah. And they come in, you see young boys come in with this ego and they think they know it all already. Whereas women they're like sponges. Like, yeah, teach me, and okay, I'll believe you. And they just do it. And you don't see, like, I had a kid come in and like you just talked about, he said he could do 315 for sets of 10. It's very often I have boys come in and they'll be like, okay, we need to get going. What's your bench? Cause I've never dealt with them before. And they'll tell you a number. And I know it's complete bullshit. And so I adjust my percentages down because I know it's bullshit. And like they fail to hit the reps I need at that weight. And it's like, yeah, so you really bench that? And it's like, no, just tell me the truth. Mm-hmm. We'll get there. But, women are very, they're much easier to deal with. And they're also in many ways more driven. I forget who it was talking about. It's like, you want to have, as a personal trainer, you want a good client, get a woman with a goal. Like if you have a woman that's divorced and she's about to go to her 30th high school reunion, she will fucking do anything. You could tell her to jump through fire and eat rice cakes and that's it. And she will do that shit until to get in the shape she wants to for that event. Like there's no stopping them, but they're driven in a different way like that. But, yeah, it's neat. Well, the thing that makes me wonder is how long. So we're seeing this rise in women's sports and we're seeing it more okay and acceptable. And how many decades does it take for them to get where it's going to happen? They're going to get to where the boys are, where it's just expected that I'm strong. And when are they going to get that ego that the boys have because of decades of like women that are strong? I don't know, but right now it's a fun area to be in. And like, I thoroughly enjoy helping young girls just realize what they can be. Like one of my girls she's a softball player and she's been coming to me for 2.5 months. And surprisingly, her parents write me and she just knocked her first home run out of the park. And I was like, there we go. It's paying off, Mm-hmm. And she's a 8th grader that just, she was able to hit her first dinger out of the park. And that translates right to just getting stronger. So.
Yeah. The other part, too, is that women don't have as many opportunities for, like, those crazy club sport. Like, you have softball, but you don't have as many, like, softball and volleyball basically are the big two with women where it's, like, all year round. But, pretty much every boys' sport is, like, or soccer, softball, volleyball for women. Every boys' sport is almost, like, taken to the extreme of, like, playing a ridiculous amount.
Yeah.
And there's more opportunities to do that, where you have like these teams that really should be like kind of rec teams, but they're like, no, we got to go to Florida to play the same people you play,
Yeah. Yeah, and that's all opening, and that's the good thing. It's starting to grow. And that's like we talked about when we recorded this last time. It was not long ago. It's been when I was living in Phoenix, which now is 15 years ago. Like, it was normal. I would show up to a powerlifting meet, and there might be one girl there. And she didn't have her own category. And now, like, you go to a powerlifting meet, and they're 2 days because they need a day for the women. That's a drastic rise, in women's sports in a short amount of time. The amount, because, it was odd. I remember it was like, oh, wow, there's a woman lifting today. Mm-hmm. And now it'd be, like, weird if there wasn't, So, it's just, I don't know. Part of it, I believe, is just because of the other women. Like, and that's what we tell my daughters. Like, you're on this groundbreaking period in women's sports right now. It's like, be proud of that. You're doing shit that 5 years ago other girls just wouldn't do. and you're setting the groundwork for generations ahead of you or behind you. So, and that's a neat thing. I mean, you're laying down these bricks that the boys have been able to walk on for a long time. There's now a path for these other girls coming up. They're seeing you, and like, let's say 100 girls are watching you. If one says, "Oh, I want to do that too," that's a good thing, you know. So
it's exciting for fans too, like you were talking about last week, like that upward arc. You're on the frontier of something, like Arnold's old quote about, I love it when people say nobody's ever done it, because then I get to be the first one to do it. But it's even fun to watch the records fall, because actually changing, you know.
And you're seeing it in others. Look at the NCAA women's basketball. Like their viewership crushed men's this year. And we had a girl that came out and broke the all-time scoring record of anybody, you know. She beat the dudes. And then what was it? I think she went in and she went to the NBA three-point shooting contest and like hung in there. So it's neat. And it's things like that, like ball sports and things, to a point. Like, strength isn't a huge part of that. Like, and you can have the same skill. It's just put in the work, you know. You're not seeing that. I mean, will we ever see like a woman in NFL? Maybe, but like the physical barrier that can't be beat is too high there.
Especially
if we do, she'll be a kicker.
Yeah, a kicker.
Yeah,
and you've seen that. Like, this year was the first year that there was a non-kicker in NCAA football. Some girl playing a safety, and she was jacked. But but that's not going to be the norm, and I don't think it will, because you have too many physiological things to defeat in that sport. Like, there's just, okay, that 280-pound linebacker's about to hit you. You know? And that's not a good thing. So, you know, there's just a biological difference there. But some of your sports, like, even, I guarantee you, like the women's American soccer team would crush most boys. You know?
Oh yeah.
You know, just make them look silly. So it's just, and that playing field is not so dependent on physical size and strength.
It's a good point. I mean, you are comparing elite to elite. I mean, you know, how high a woman can go versus the NFL, for example.
Yes.
But it's worth noting, and we've all seen this in person, and Mike and I would like textbook like norms tables, and drill too, I'm sure, which is normative strength, like 50 percentile strength, the 50th percentile. Obviously, on average, men being larger are stronger, but a woman who trains for any length of time can equal or exceed a dude, right? Just raw strength, like bench press, squat. Again, I'm talking about a woman who trains like with Drill or Phil Mike, and trains resistance training versus an average sedentary male.
Yes. And
all the benefits that come from that are just very exciting. So long as they're told by society, yeah, you're allowed to be strong, you know, or like, feel like, I know your women, you know, they would talk about valuing big butts and big squats and stuff like that, instead of being a twiggy, you know, marathon runner kind of thing. Nothing against marathon running. That's intense and brutal in its own way, but fine. Yep. But why not also this other thing, from self-defense to anything else? You know, this average Joe creepy dude who wants to grab one of the women who work with you guys, I pity him, right? He's going to be annihilated, and he just doesn't see it coming. A woman like that punches you across the jaw, you're going down.
Yes.
Mixed martial artists, I mean, that's been a huge rise over the last 5 to 10 years also.
I lost a lot of potential future male clients because I had women outlifting them when they started.
Yeah,
so.
Yep.
A lot.
Yeah, I'd say all of my women that have been with me more than a year are stronger than the average guy. They just are. And like you were alluding to, Lonnie, it's not, I don't want to like downplay endurance sports. And like, it's not a bad thing. Like, I want people to do any sport they want. Like, is endurance sports my thing? No, but it is a good sport. But I think the reason I don't feel the need to push women towards endurance sports, because that's been okay for like 70 years. Like, the first woman ran the Boston Marathon in 1947. That barrier's been crossed. We don't need to tell you it's okay. She did 60 years ago, but strength sports is new, and it's in the last decade that it's just become okay. So it's been okay for women to do that stuff for decades.
Right. I mean, even video games. You think about 20 years ago, all the video game characters that you could choose that were women, they were high dexterity or fast, or they were smart, or they were anything but brutally huge and strong.
Yes.
And now we're really kind of embracing this combatant, the main character can very easily be a strong woman. Now, still not the brute with the huge traps and the, not quite to that extent. But yeah, there does seem to be this shift over the decades of valuing, the super heroines in a different way. They're not just the smaller, sleeker versions of the males, but they're equal,
So that's an interesting point, Lonnie, because it's something I thought about with the first Wonder Woman movie. So not Gal Gadot herself, but the people they chose to be the Amazons were people who lift. They were women who lift and CrossFitters and such like that. And so it's one of those things public perception of popular media public perception of women who beat up dudes is just supermodel skinny types that just artificially in the show have strength. You know what I mean? One kick, knock dudes down kind of thing. And it's they try to make that leap to that versus now you have, and they'll play in movies something like Ronda Rousey and women who actually are capable, and they look like it. You know what I mean? So there's some representation now in popular media that reinforces, strength as well, which has taken a long time. I mean, it's almost always been dainty, the kind of dainty women, and you throw them into an action role and you're just now they're, now they beat up dudes or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's but the women who do or can don't look like that. And it's taken a long time for pop culture to kind of catch up. I mean, it's still not there, obviously, but that was one of the first places I recognized there's some representation of women who are truly strong in the action hero role.
Right. Realistic, not supernatural. I know what you're saying. Some waif kicks you across the universe. It's not with her toothpick leg. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about women who look strong. Yeah.
And I mean a lot of that has changed in our lifetime too. And part of that, as far as popular media and TV shows and stuff, is I remember the outrage when what was it, Linda Hamilton in Terminator 2.
Oh yeah,
she was jacked by that level, the 1991 level. They're oh my god, she is ripped, and
she
that was
can do 3 pull-ups.
Yes, but I mean that was groundbreaking. That's 30 years ago, 34 years ago, and now she's a twink compared to most of these girls. But that was a groundbreaking role, and the shape she was in, and it's been in our lifetime that it's been okay for girls to be something besides this skinny twig. You need to be smaller, and now they're give me the cakes and pies and the deadlift bar. And you're seeing, badass bitches, and they're embracing that role, which is opposite of the just shut up and get in the kitchen. It's a good thing. No, it's honest, but that's where we were at. That's where things were not that long ago. I'm not saying that we were at that level in our lifetime. Lots of things changed, but it's an amazing place for women to be, and that's it's like I said. I mean, what boils down to me is the excitement around women in strength sports. It's the fun thing to watch. Women in sports in general, because of that rise, you're seeing this drastic rise, and everybody wants to see. If I go to the Olympics, I want to see a record broken, and most likely that's going to happen in the women's arena. It just is because it's only been acceptable for a short amount of time. So we're still on that drastic rise that the men went through decades ago. Now it takes decades for a man to come up and break a record. It takes you need 1,000 dudes to try it for somebody to do it. And right now, women are at that area where it's possible to have that fast rise. So,
or you just erase the weight classes and start over.
well, yeah, you can do that. So they've done that
irony-
numerous times in weightlifting.
Oh yeah.
So
The irony is, some of the irony here is if you want a physique like that, we're still going to have to get in the kitchen. That's not just women, but it's not just women, but
Right on.
But like I said, it's just an amazing place to be, and good job on all the women out there, and like the ones, take it to heart what you're doing today, because you are setting, like I talked about earlier, you're setting the groundwork for future generations. To just, if nothing more than showing girls, look, it's okay. It's okay to do this. It's okay to do so-called manly things. And you may not ever be as strong as the dudes. You just won't. And that's not your fault. That's just
the elite
genetics.
dudes. Right.
Yeah, that's just genetics. There's going to be, we are, in fact, bigger and stronger. It's just fact. But be what you can be. It's okay to take it to the level that you can get to and show these other girls, and like you can be more than an equal to most dudes on the planet.
Well, how often are these very strong women, like the competitive women like you work with, how often are they going to come in contact with super elite guys outside of the gym? Like almost every man they meet, they're going to be physically superior.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's like,
once they're, they've achieved a certain level of fitness, of course, but
yes. Oh, I talked about it not long ago. The last Swiss, I was flying back from that, and I had like a 4-hour layover in a airport, and I just sat there and I looked at the population now, and it was sad to me because I sat there for 4 hours just watching people, and not a motherfucker passed me that I wouldn't like. If I wanted his shit, I could just go take it, and 90% of my girls could do that too.
Oh my god!
And I don't do it. But
right.
That's a sad thing we're in, because there are people out there, like, if you were just a bad person, today's the day to live, because, like, you could just take their shit. There aren't the people, like, the shape our country's in, like I talked about before the show started. I got 4 boys, and one of them can do a chin-up. Like, the level we've reached is, as a general population, is low. So this uprising in women, like we talked about, most of my women, I would have no worry about them walking down a dark alley alone and some dude coming up to them, because 90% chance they're going to be better than you. And that's a good thing to be. And that's why I push my daughter towards boxing and wrestling and jiu-jitsu and things like that. It's like, I want her to be able to handle herself in this world, and that's okay. I'm going to love the day that my daughter gets attacked by somebody and whoops their ass.
We used to talk about that in martial art, like self-defense classes and stuff a lot. It's not a guarantee, because, you always hear people, well, because of my experience with judo, I know that it's not all just strength. It's like, yeah, but these are cards you're stacking in your favor, right? And don't tell me that it's not at least cards stacked in your favor, right, to be that strong.
Yeah.
So. Even if you're incredibly skilled, this goes for both males or females, if you're the aggressor, you don't know who you're starting shit with.
Yep.
Like that person could be, I worked with a high level, she fought in the UFC, she was in her lab for a while. And if you saw her in street clothes, you're like, yeah, she's fit, but she didn't, I wouldn't say stand out. You would see her, getting ready to train. You're like, oh yeah, she's very fit. Yeah. But just walking down the road, like you wouldn't know that she fought in the UFC at an extremely high level and would destroy almost everyone.
Well, I think we can call it a day. And this one actually recorded. So
I've been watching the timer.
Yep, so have I. I've checked on it like 6 times. So until next week, everybody. And I went ahead and I went onto the Iron Radio Facebook page, my Facebook page, because I hadn't done it yet. And I put out the link to my seminar coming up to sign up for it in Bozeman, Montana. If anybody's interested, 2 days.
What are the dates again, Phil?
It is right after frickin' 4th of July, which would be the 5th and 6th, I think it is. It's the weekend right following 4th of July. So I believe it's the 5th and 6th. I don't have it open right now. So
I'll be there too.
Yep, and Mike will be there too. I put that up there, and if we can talk everybody else and come in, that'd be awesome. Hint, hint, Lonnie, Jarrell.
Lonnie.
So we can.
You know what? I'll take a look at my little RV planning map and see.
Exactly, dude. Drive
Get
that
up
RV up there. You can camp, and we're right by Yellowstone.
Which I love.
Have a good. Yeah, it's beautiful up there. We've stayed up there and camped up there a lot. So,
Jarrell wants to fly out for a weekend.
Exactly. Come out. We can all have a good time. So, all right, everybody.
All right.
Till next week.
Iron Radio is accepting donations. If you like what we do, the professors, the scientists, the bodybuilding show promoters, the athletes themselves in powerlifting and bodybuilding, please consider making a donation or maybe buying something from the ironradio.org store. We also are accepting supporting members. So for $4 a month, which is frankly less than the bank sneaks out of your account in fees, you can step up and support a form of sort of public radio for the bodybuilding and powerlifting and strength community. The Iron Radio podcast and all of the audio on ironradio.org is for informational purposes only. If you're interested in starting a diet or exercise program, it's important to check with your physician. Also seek the help of registered dietitians, athletic trainers, and qualified exercise physiologists in order to make the progress that you need.